And I'm pleased to introduce Samira Baharami, who is the director of CUNY on the Concourse. Samira, yeah, just quick wave so we know it's you. And I'm going to hand back to Martha, who is going to introduce our esteemed panel. I do want to thank our panel. You'll hear more about them, but Alana, Matthew, and Cecilia, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, Martha, over to you.
Thanks so much, Jane. And thank you for such a warm welcome, always. I'm sitting here, actually, a quick public service announcement, everybody. I am at the Cannabis Workforce and Business Development Program. We operate out of the Bronx Business Tech Incubator, located at the location Jane just described, CUNY on the Concourse, our satellite location. Everyone who is in the cannabis industry is included in our grant for free participation in our program. So it is free of charge. You can come here. We have shared workspace, free conference room space, and we have fabulous AV technology so that you can have a live presentation, say, of about 50 people and a virtual audience of endless numbers. And so lots of our entrepreneurs, we typically start with an idea-based person or an interested entrepreneur. Maybe they've gone beyond the idea a little bit. They've got their rudimentary plan in place. It can be somebody who is either plant touching and in need of a license, in which case we can help to prepare the application, as we did with the most recent application window. And if you're not a plant touching business, that's not a problem. We'd love to have you too. Our specialty in terms of what we offer are business planning, 5-year cost and revenue projections, pro forma. When it comes to real estate and accounting and legal help, we have a list of referrals that we can make. Legal Aid Society, for example, is free legal services. We work closely with the SBS, with the Business Solutions Center. The cannabis accountant tonight, or rather cannabis account manager for the SBS Bronx location, named Kareem, is going to be, we hope, I think, one of our guests tonight. So maybe he'll say hello at some point. But just a quick plug to let you know we're here. And Samira, maybe if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat a link to our website and where folks can register to become members here for one-to-one business advising. We'd be very happy to have you. And now back to onto the show. Welcome. This is our 4th panel discussion. We call them cannabis panel discussions. We're hoping to make them bi-monthly. This is our 4th for this year. And the topic, of course, as you know, is regulatory compliance and how really regulations, a lot of times people are quite afraid of regulations. They're overwhelmed by the language. They're overwhelmed by the concepts and sort of the rigidness of what people perceive regulations. But in fact, keep the industry safe, and most importantly, keep your business aligned and risk-free from any kinds of fines or, from heaven forbid, even worse, from being closed. So tonight we have 3 really, really talented and amazingly informed guests for our panel discussion. I'm going to start with an introduction of Cecilia Oyediran. Cecilia, give us a wave. Cecilia works as the deputy director of ILR's Labor and Employment Law Program, designing curriculum and providing instruction on workplace law to employers and workers, including social equity participants in New York's cannabis industry and justice-involved individuals. In her previous position, Cecilia provided legal guidance and support to clients in the legal cannabis industry, specializing in matters relating to licensing, regulatory compliance, and other related issues. Cecilia further expanded her legal expertise by gaining valuable in-house experience as corporate counsel at a publicly traded multi-state operator and company. In this role, she leveraged her legal acumen to provide comprehensive counsel and support to the company in the areas of commercial transactions, labor and employment, compliance, and real estate, navigating the complex legal landscape of the cannabis industry and ensuring compliance with regulations across multiple jurisdictions. Cecilia is a member of the Executive Committee of the Cannabis Law Section of the New York Bar Association and is a frequent speaker and panelist, like tonight, on a range of issues related to cannabis legalization, social equity, and cannabis compliance. Cecilia holds a Bachelor's of Art degree from Yale University, a Master's in Education from Harvard University, and a law degree from Stanford Law. So welcome, Cecilia. In a moment, Cecilia is going to be our first speaker, but I think first we'll introduce our whole panel. Next, we have Alana Hans-Cohen, who is a cannabis attorney licensed in, now get this, everyone, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Washington State, Colorado, and Illinois. Fantastic. Alana currently serves as assistant counsel at the New York State Office of Cannabis Management, where she provides comprehensive legal counsel to the office, ensuring that the state's cannabis policies and regulations are effectively developed, implemented, and of course, enforced. Her expertise in regulatory compliance is instrumental in fostering a legal framework that ensures cannabis industry in New York will operate within the highest standards and promotes equity, inclusion, and economic growth within the state. In addition to her role at OCM, Alana is an adjunct professor at Medgar Evers College, the CUNY as well, and the first CUNY campus to offer a cannabis degree program. She teaches 2 courses as part of the bachelor's degree, Commercializing Cannabis Science and Retail Dispensary Standard Operating Procedures, also known as SOPs, which we'll hear more about, I'm sure, as the evening goes on. Before joining the Office of Cannabis Management, Alana spent 4 years in private practice, where she represented minority, women, disabled veteran, and social equity businesses at each level of the cannabis supply chain, including cultivars, manufacturers, distributors, and dispensaries, as well as cannabis industry investors and ancillary businesses. Alana is committed to using her legal acumen to support initiatives that promote inclusivity within the cannabis industry. Her true passion lies in advocating for social equity in the cannabis industry, and her professional and personal philosophy includes giving back in ways that make a meaningful difference to the local and global communities to which she dedicates her advocacy. She's worked closely with stakeholders across the state to ensure that New York's cannabis market is accessible and fair, particularly for communities disproportionately impacted by previous cannabis prohibitions. So thanks so much, Alana, and welcome. And last, we have Matthew Garzia, Chief Operating Officer at MFNY, Marijuana Farms of New York, a licensed distributor, processor, and cultivator located in New Windsor, New York. Since entering the market in 2023, MFNY has shown substantial growth to make up over 5% of the entire shelf for New York State adult use cannabis market, offering more than 120 SKUs and capturing over 17% of the state's market sales in concentrates. Matthew began his career in strategic planning, where he was the youngest member of the Enterprise Risk Committee at Presidential Life Insurance. He later transitioned to the healthcare industry, gaining over 12 years of experience in various roles with a focus on regulatory compliance and administrative operations. Known for his strategic vision and operational expertise, Matthew is dedicated to driving continued growth and innovation at MFNY. And so you can see why it is that I feel so excited, really, about hosting this panel tonight. I really believe we are very lucky to have 3 individuals who come from different perspectives in the current market, but come with over decades, truly decades combined, of regulatory expertise in all areas. So without further ado, Cecilia, it's all yours.
Thank you, Martha. Good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all today to talk about regulatory compliance, which is a topic that's so very crucial to the success and sustainability of New York's cannabis industry. As Martha mentioned, I'm here representing the Cannabis Workforce Initiative, which is a state-funded workforce development program that's dedicated to providing free education to both employers and employees on workplace best practices and cannabis career exploration in the cannabis industry. And beyond our training, we also offer practical tools on our website, which is cannabisworkforce.org. I'll put it in the chat later, like sample employee handbooks to guide businesses in setting up compliant workplace policies, career guides, information about federal and state labor and employment laws, among many other resources. Because even though cannabis is still federally illegal, cannabis employers must still adhere to federal labor and employment laws. So, as well as state and local employment and labor laws. So it's really, really important to stay informed about these laws so that you don't risk losing money or worse, your business or your reputation. So with that, I'll move on to some of the common struggles that we see new entrepreneurs face in the industry, with more of a labor and employment lens. But compliance with labor peace agreements, that's a major area that we're kind of seeing a lot of issues popping up. As many of you know, in order to obtain a license in New York, the licensee is required to enter into what is called a labor peace agreement with a labor union. And many operators are unaware of this requirement or misunderstand it, its implications. And essentially what a labor peace agreement is, it's an agreement that, you know, once you sign it, it means that as an employer, you're agreeing not to interfere with union organizing should your employees decide to be in that process, right? And so a lot of times people don't really know what it means not to interfere. So I'll give some examples of that. We have some cases with Amazon where one plant in Staten Island, the employer put up in every bathroom a list of all the anti-union statements saying how horrible the union is and, you know, what would happen if the employees unionized and that sort of thing. There've also been reports of people being fired for trying to organize unions at their workplaces. Employers often do this in order to discourage the employees from joining a union. And, you know, using other scare tactics like we will move your business to another state if you unionize, that sort of thing. So if you sign the LPA, what you're saying is that as the employer, I'm going to remain neutral. I'm just going to sit back and let the employees decide whether or not they want to join a union. What an LPA does not mean that your employees have unionized. They still have to go through that whole process, still go through a whole collective bargaining agreement process. It just means that you will remain neutral. And in exchange, the union agrees not to strike or boycott or picket during the organizing campaign, right? So that's all the LPA does. It does not automatically unionize the workplace. It really just protects the process so that employees can decide for themselves. New York really, in crafting its cannabis industry, wants to see an industry where employees have a voice, and that's why they've invested in programs like the Cannabis Workforce Initiative and have requirements like this in order to really try to foster that. Another thing about the LPA is that it must be in effect for the entire duration of your business operation. So your employees may never organize, but you still have to have an LPA in place. And it has to be entered into with a bona fide labor union. We've heard reports, especially in a lot of other states, California has had a lot of trouble with this, where employers will enter into LPAs, but they'll be with basically sham unions that are not designed to protect the interests of employees. And so regulators have caught wind of this and have started voiding those LPAs and, you know, trying to get everybody compliant in that way. And the OCM has actually provided regulations on how they define what's called a bona fide labor union, right? So it has to be a local union that represents New York employees and cannot be influenced by the employers, right? So there are several fake unions claiming to represent employees, but really are just there to represent management interests. So it's just really, really important to make sure that you're signing an LPA with a real labor union that has a history of organizing and working with collective bargaining agreements with employers. So, you know, we will see the fact that the labor peace requirement is a requirement in this industry. It's likely that we'll begin to see a rise of unionization efforts in this space, you know, especially as businesses mature and, you know, they begin to have larger workforces and things like that. So, you know, I know as a new operator, you have a million and one things on your plate already, but, you know, we do want to encourage you to consider really kind of thinking of being proactive and developing a labor relations plan of some sort, which really should just be a way to engage in open dialogue with your employees, right? Figure out how to proactively develop that relationship with them and that process so that you can address their concerns around whether it's compensation, benefits, workplace conditions, before unionization becomes an issue, right? And of course, if you offer competitive wages and good benefits, that also will decrease the likelihood of that specific site deciding to unionize. Another area that we have been seeing people struggle with is discrimination and harassment. Unfortunately, there are some cannabis employers that don't fully really understand their obligations under New York's quite robust anti-discrimination and harassment laws. We've heard reports of inappropriate touching in the workplace, just sexual harassment, and sort of things like that. And cannabis operators are subject to the same federal and state anti-discrimination laws as any other business, right? Regarding preventing this kind of discrimination and harassment in the workplace, based on the protected classes, right? So things like race, gender, disability, and other protected characteristics. And if you don't have adequate policies or trainings in this area, this can lead to pretty intense and damaging legal risks, right? So they need to be properly addressed. And one way that we suggest doing that is to make sure that you establish very clear written anti-discrimination policies to ensure that they align with the law, right? And to make sure that your employees read it, understand it, have done training. We actually on our website have a sample employee handbook with anti-discrimination policies in there. So highly recommend checking that out on our website. And we also offer a free class on discrimination and harassment as well. Again, this area is a line field, line mine, man. I don't know the proper war terminology, but
landmines.
Landmines. Thank you. I'm a pacifist, so but so it's just really important to make sure that your managers, your employees all get the training that they need in this area, because it's really, really important. Implicit bias training is also something that I would recommend, and it's actually required through the responsible vendor trainings. And essentially, if you're not familiar, the responsible vendor trainings are essentially trainings that OCM requires cannabis owners and employees undergo. And one of those trainings that's required is implicit bias. So we're actually in the process of developing one. But it's really in order to encourage employees to really recognize and address their unconscious beliefs and biases, and how that might impact how they make decisions in the workplace or how they interact with their fellow colleagues. So it's really in an effort to really just promote the fair treatment in hiring and customer service and workplace dynamics. So, and then the last issue really is just labor and employment compliance generally. Cannabis businesses they really have their hands full just navigating the complex regulatory structure in and of itself when it comes to just being a plant touching business. But even though labor and employment compliance might not seem sexy, it's very, very, very important, right? So you really have to make sure that you develop a business that has a good procedures and policies to ensure compliance with all of the many, many labor and employment laws that you're required to follow, right? If you don't, again, it can increase the likelihood that your employees are going to unionize. You can face discrimination lawsuits. If your employees are not being classified properly, you can get sued and have to pay staggering back pay. It can be a lot, but it's worth investing in getting it right so that you mitigate the risks for your businesses, right? You really can't have a successful business without successful employees. So really, really consider investing in human resources support and legal advice, honestly, to stay on top of these labor regulations, because it is a lot, and you want to make sure that your workplace policies, such as your employee handbooks, are compliant. And of course, also making sure that you're implementing ongoing trainings for your managers as well, and employees on issues like anti-discrimination and harassment. So I know I said a lot, so I will leave it there and save some room for my great co-panelists who will offer some awesome insights as well.
First of all, Cecilia, I'm amazed with, friends who are watching, we do have a little schedule we're trying to stay to be time efficient. Cecilia has stayed to the minute. Bravo. I'd like to say, I want a quick exploration. Cecilia, I am surprised to hear that it sounds like there are, when you say bona fide unions, I thought in my notes I wrote, is there anything else besides
I know.
Folks who are actually acting like they're a union, but they're not a union?
Yeah, there are. If you Google articles, there are especially a lot of articles coming out of California about it. But there are definitely these unions that kind of, they call them, I think, telephone booth unions, although no one uses telephone booths anymore, but whatever. And they just kind of, prey on new industries and I'll try to align themselves with the management. And so they're not actually really, like, they're getting union due fees from the employees, but they're not truly advocating for their interests. They're just, there to basically be a buffer between the employees and management, but not really truly move things forward in the spirit of like collective bargaining and figuring out the best way to maintain the terms and conditions for employees.
Cecilia, is there a way that our business owners can protect themselves from these kind of folks?
Well, you really do your research, do your due diligence, like see the types of, if an organization approaches you, really look to see, go on their website, have they been representing workers in New York yet? Or, what does it look like if they have been representing employers in other states, if they have been on union sites in other states, like what that looks like. But you really want to do your due diligence. That's the best way to protect yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it. It also sounds, I picked up on the idea for a new business owner, investing in human resources support actually would be a wise place to invest some early, when you're doing your first round of who do I want to hire to support me, perhaps a human resources person is more valuable than you realize.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And friends, I forgot, I didn't really let you know anything about our organizational structure. What we're doing is Cecilia has led the way in sharing, and then Alana will share from an OCM perspective and Matthew from an operator's perspective, what the top 3 to 5 concerns they see on the day-to-day from their vantage. And Cecilia being with CWI, working very closely with operators, with license holders, and doing educational workshops. So she's really exposed to a vast array of different kinds of folks coming into the industry at different stages, right? Yeah. Oh my gosh, Cecilia, thank you. Thank you so much for that. The other thing I forgot to mention is that with regard to questions and comments, if you wouldn't mind putting your questions in the chat, Samira is going to keep an eye on that for us. And at the end of our panelist presentations, we're going to have a nice amount of time left to ask any questions you like. And during that time, we'll use the hand raising component so there can be a little more flow, might be a little more back and forth among participants, a little more conversational. Okay, so as a reminder, please put your questions in the chat. At the end, when we get to the questions, you can raise your hand to contribute to any of the conversations that are ongoing at that time. Okay, terrific. Our next panelist, Alana Hans-Cohen, you're up.
Thank you, Martha, and also thank you to Lehman College and the Cannabis Workforce and Small Business Development Program. I'm super excited to be here. I am a little biased, but it's always a pleasure to be on a panel with Cecilia. And she was fantastic, so she's always a hard act if I have to follow her. But she made a lot of really great points. I think that, people watching this should take heed, because, you know, she said things like, I took a couple notes, and, you know, she said things like, you know, it's although it seems like boring stuff, you know, it's important. And the one thing I always like to say to people is, you know, cannabis business is business first. So you have to know, like, think about all your business compliance, just if, you know, you were any business, and then you add your, you know, regulatory compliance related to your regulated industry. And I think, you know, that's why people do need to focus on it, because, and continue to remember that it is a business first. And then she also said something that compliance is not sexy. I feel that also comes with cannabis tax, but although compliance may not be sexy, money is sexy. And if you want to keep your bag, you want to be in compliance. So I just wanted to note those things. So I'm going to talk about my issues in two areas. So first, I'm going to start briefly. I'm going to talk quickly about compliance issues related to licensing, because even if you're already licensed, you know, you have to get renewed. You are going to want to make sure all of the documents that you're going to submit during your renewal match up with what you're supposed to have, and that they all comply with the authorizations and prohibitions, you know. So particularly you should be looking for stuff related to your TPIs, and like people you're going to have goods and services agreements or financing type agreements or leases, and making sure there are not going to be any violations as far as if they are TPIs on licensed tiers that they would not be able to contract with you. So like these are very, I think, super important things. One of the reasons is, you know, we have our regs, and, you know, the office definitely wants to ferret out predatory behavior, you know, to the degree that we can. And again, we want to make sure everyone's complying with the stuff that they need to be following. And another thing with the licensing is just, there's a large information gap, as we all know. But it's super important to stay informed, seek guidance, and remember that there are a lot of free ways to educate yourself in New York, particularly downstate. You have programs like this, programs through OCM, programs through Cannabis NYC, that, you know, even if those programs mentioned don't have a resource for that specific issue, they probably can direct you to a reputable source who may be able to provide you that resource and that information that you need. So do realize there is a lot of free stuff out there. You just got to be able to hustle and find it, and, you know, put the work in. The other thing now that I would like to touch on really is kind of the bigger area where we think about compliance, which is, you know, when it comes to operations. So, you know, the OCM and licensees, we all have a responsibility to keep the public safe, you know, and I think as our market matures, you know, compliance will be an even bigger focus, you know, as we have more operators, as the OCM, you know, continues to staff up. And it's, again, super important, obviously, about public safety and things like that. One thing to think about is, you know, we are here to help you be compliant. If you have questions, definitely reach out to the compliance program staff. They're here to help you. We don't want you to get in trouble. We do want to continue to support you and help you be successful, and just know the resources there. And we're not like here like, gotcha. You know, if we see a problem, we want to work with you to correct the problem, you know? And I think just to keep that in mind, I know, you know, sometimes the agencies can be the bad guy, but we really are here to work with you. And so like, if you were to have a compliance issue, you know, like our compliance program staff's likely going to, you know, do a statement of findings, and, you know, go back and forth and support you on preparing a corrective action plan, to work with you to become compliant and to stay compliant. Like, again, we're just not here just to shut down legal businesses. We just want to make sure licensees, you all understand your roles and responsibilities as operators. And so some of the next things I'm going to bring up really are, hopefully for you all, actionable insights that you can take and actually use, rather than just a bunch of legal jargon. So after talking to the program staff, and like, I wanted to kind of get up to date on what are we currently seeing, like, you know, And I think some of the things that we are seeing as common issues that everyone should be aware of are things related to your packaging and labeling. Some people will have missing fields that are required, or universal symbols, QR codes, etc., as well as making sure your packaging is not appealing to people under 21. Again, look at your, make sure you don't have cartoons, symbols, any kind of phrases, any kind of thing that you think would target youth, because that's just going to be a red flag on you. So it's better to avoid those things now. Stay updated on the packaging and, labeling requirements, which are currently in public comment. And, just be sure to like design this packaging so that it's compliant, but of course you still want it to be marketable. And we want you to be marketable. There's also new outdoor sign regs, which, the current regs the regs are becoming less restrictive, but they're not there yet. And, right now you kind of have to limit to 2 signs only with your name, address, and the nature of the business, and, no images, no selling messages, and it has to be affixed. You can't do like a sandwich board thing like we see regularly for like a coffee shop. Avoid these violations, guys. I don't want you to get in trouble. And of course, any of these like non-compliance things, it's going to cost you money, or you're going to have to remove these signs that you got, which you just paid money for. And again, protect the bag. Inventory tracking. So right now, as everybody I'm sure knows, and I feel like they touched on it today at the meeting, we're still working on our BioTrack API. So while we are waiting for this, it's highly recommended you all maintain super good records. Remember, anybody watching who's coming from legacy and changing into the regulated market, I know you're used to not having records, but like records are key here. So records, paperwork. Just, I know it's annoying and I'm going to harp on it, but of course, you're going to have security issues. So, make sure your locations are secure. Make sure all your stuff is functioning, because people also tend to not keep up with the equipment. Like they'll let a camera die out, things like that. But you want to protect yourself, and we want you to protect yourself. Want to prevent theft, want to prevent safety issues for your employees as well as the public. Sanitary standards, I think, is another one. And this actually kind of goes to Cecilia's employment, because this is related to, OSHA violations. Not only is the sanitary issues, depending on your license, not good for the products you're making, but it's also not good for the employees and the things that they're breathing in. So like in certain situations, you need to have ensure your employees have the, proper protection, and, that you are cleaning and sanitizing the way you're supposed to under the regs, prevent risks. All of this is a process in risk management for your business. And you just want to prevent the contamination and, again, protect your employees, even if you're not like a retailer, because people will tend to think, oh, okay, well, it's just, in retail where, there's not going to be as much sanitary issues, but, across the supply chain. And kind of with that, I would say also would be cannabis waste. So make sure you're following your waste disposal practices. Obviously, it's going to be different if you're a retailer as opposed to, say, a larger cultivator, because your waste is going to be, I would imagine, significantly higher in a larger operation, particularly in cultivation. And making sure you're following the regs in the sense that, so if you're retailing, you're doing, you don't have tons of waste. We provide ways in the regs on how to dispose of it that you don't have to, say, contract out and get, pay somebody a large amount to come pick up your waste. Obviously, that's going to be different in a large operation where you have a lot of waste. But, just educating yourself on those things will not only keep you compliant, but it's, again, going to save you money. And if you have questions on those things, of course, please reach out to the office compliance. Like, the people in compliance are just very much into compliance, and they are here to help you. They love to talk about it. And if they can help you work through something, they're here to support you. I think those are probably the biggest items, but one of the things I did want to just make sure is to say that, OCM is a partner. We are here to support and guide you. We want you to be in compliance. Again, we want you to be successful. And, think about regulations as not just hurdles, but again, a tool to sort of keep everybody safe, keep things fair, and of course, keep our industry thriving because, things not being safe, it brings a bad reputation to all of us and the industry. And I just think these are things we want to prevent. And again, going back to your like OSHA and all of those things, like those are very costly compliance issues to deal with. So, don't risk being out of compliance because you want to save your money. Like nobody, I would imagine most people on here, you're not millionaires and things like that. You're trying to build your business. You're starting up, you're doing, working hard from the ground up. And it's like, don't risk that. It's not worth it to cut a corner. I would say, regularly consult with OCM, check our website, attend meetings, voice your concerns or, things that may come up in operation. Because remember, the OCM is building out. And while there's people who maybe come from the cannabis industry and understand more of what the traditional ebbs and flows are, New York is its own beast. And it's like, we're trying to make it all work and make it all work in a good way to be able to support everybody, not just the operators, but our consumers and just the public in general. But, embrace these regulations as assets to keep your money and not have to deal with any sort of non-compliance issues or having to write a corrective action plan.
Alana, I love it. And I thank you. One of the things, oh my gosh, I thank you so much. I wrote so fast that my hand started to cramp. I couldn't keep up. One of the things, listeners, that we had talked about in preparing for this panel discussion was exactly Alana's point, which I think is so critical. Sometimes I think if you follow the media too closely, OCM is pitted as the dark negative force of restriction and difficulty and challenge. And in fact, OCM is populated by some of the most caring, hardworking, dedicated individuals I've had the pleasure of meeting and knowing. I don't know everybody there, but I do know a few. And, certainly working with Alana, that's been true. Alana, I want to highlight a few things quickly. Besides the fact that, yes, you are a partner, you've mentioned several times something that's thrilling to everyone to hear, which is reach out to our compliance program staff. Is there a direct email or a way to do that?
I want to confirm, which I will once Matt is going, but I believe, and again, I'm going to confirm this, I believe it's compliance@ocm.ny.gov. But I will confirm that before, and I will share it with you, Martha, to share with the participants and public.
Do you took the thought from my head. I was about to pledge to our listeners and our participants that I promised you to follow up with an email. Because really, I do think it's true, Alana. That's golden, is being able to actually outreach to somebody and ask a question. I was working with a client just yesterday who was referring to his back and forth with someone at OCM regarding his licensing for distribution. And I was thrilled to hear that he's got that back and forth with it with an actual person. It's a very hard thing, I'm sure, with 1,000 licenses issued, 200 operators, and 108 or 104 new ones today. I mean, I can imagine it must be, and there's only 200 of you, and you're not all in compliance, and you're not all, it's one person probably, or two people on that email. So maybe we can encourage our listeners to be patient, but at the same time, that's such golden information. So thank you. I was fascinated by the consistent reminder of some very basic things. You stay away from anything childlike, which is obvious, right? But I suppose if you take a look where certainly the unregulated mastered that. But if and even JD Vance sadly referred to it in a big moment in the press recently as well. I forget how people might actually not remember that's a really big one in New York State, I know. So I'm really, really glad you highlighted that. The packaging and labeling, I think, is a really easy thing to accidentally get wrong. There's a lot of little pieces there, right? Whether it's reporting potency or THC levels or the underlying cannabinoids, I'm not exactly up to speed with what exactly needs to be on that label, but you're encouraging me to go back and make sure I get that. So thank you for that. And security. You know, if I could add a piece there, I worked for a medical provider for 6 years here in New York State. And when we were first outfitting our dispensaries, it was mind-boggling what the regulations were requiring in terms of security. You've got silent alarms and live video feeds, and then you have cameras, and then you have to have, if you're a standalone building, you've got to have outdoor lighting, and there's a lot to keep up with. I wondered something quickly. How often are visits made? Are they pre-announced when an operator is up and running? Does a regulator just sometimes show up? Surprise?
So I think some are scheduled, but yes, I think part of the purpose is obviously to, just like in other industries, ensure people are operating accordingly, without notice.
Yeah, exactly. Good for people to know, though, that you will be, as an operator with license, you will be given, most times you'll be given notice, but sometimes you might not be, and you should be prepared. And you'll be prepared anyway by best practices. All righty. Thank you. Thank you again, Alana. That was fantastic. All right, Matthew, you ready? You're up.
I'm here. Hello, I'm here. All right. Well, first off, hi, everyone. First, I want to thank Martha, Dr. McKillop, Samira, the rest of the team at Lehman College for putting this panel together. It's always amazing to to engage in constructive and functional dialogue with stakeholders from all across the industry. We routinely hear about the program as a whole or compliance pieces as it relates to obtaining a license, but it's actually pretty rare to have an opportunity to discuss the operational and regulatory compliance pieces that are integral to both maintaining and running a cannabis business in New York. So we've heard from my awesome co-panelists regarding employment practices, licensing compliance. Alana just touched briefly on the operational compliance piece. So that's where actually I'm going to spend my time today and focusing really on operational compliance, the impact it can have on scalability, and the importance of finding the balance between regulatory requirements and operational efficiency. The reason why I bring up finding a balance is because I firmly believe in regulated safe cannabis, but sometimes the regulatory requirements don't translate to cost-efficient operations. But with that said, there is a way to build a compliant and efficient company. So just some info. To date at MFNY, we've produced over 260 SKUs with 123 active SKUs in 5 product categories. We focus primarily on live resin and rosin products. So because we don't add any terpenes and we're limited to the amount of cannabis we can grow, we have a constant rotation of genetics, which translates into different manufacturing processes for each SKU. This can actually create a lot of internal pressure on the company and our workers to shift their processes and procedures. However, we found that by creating a compliance-driven culture allows us to have that flexibility and allows us to focus on standardization of processes, which are absolutely imperative to maintain fiscal responsibility. As you all know, in any new market, the volatility and dynamism of regulatory requirements can be difficult to navigate. Quoting former OCM Chief of Staff Axel Burnaby at his last CCB meeting, I think it was last November, he said, New York has created the most comprehensive set of regulations in the country, if not the world. When your licensing is contingent upon maintaining compliance, it's crucial to build a team that adheres to regulatory standards, period. Some of the ways that I've been able to do that at MFNY is through our compliance framework. And I think that breaks down primarily into 3 focus areas. So first, it's setting the expectations and tone from the top. If you as the owner of your business or management prioritizes compliance and communicates that to both your prospective hires and your current staff, as well as practice it yourself, it demonstrates that it's a core value for the company and there's no other way of doing things. Secondly, you have to establish clear policies and procedures. Like Cecilia mentioned with employment, It's the same with compliance. Developing clear, concise policies and SOPs, or having a method to disseminate it to that information to your team, is also super important. So SOPs, or standard operating procedures, are, in my opinion, the most important piece of creating consistent quality, as well as maintaining compliance within the program. So SOPs provide clear guidance, and they minimize mistakes that can lead to compliance violations. It's critical in any manufacturing space, but especially in cannabis. We are creating products that are being ingested by people. And like Alana mentioned, their health and safety repercussions if there's deviations from that. Those can be contamination events like foreign matter making its way into products, microbial issues, a variety of other health and safety issues that can really impact not just your business. It's a risk to your business, and it's a risk to consumers. Third, conduct regular audits and assessments. So when you shouldn't just rely on OCM coming. In any business where margins are constantly fluctuating, it's imperative to conduct routine audits and process evaluations that can identify any gaps or risks. So we actually conduct a number of process audits and on a fairly regular basis to make sure that we're both validating our compliance methodology, but also optimizing our production process. As part of the program, the majority of license holders will have to attain their CGMP, or current good manufacturing practices, certification. And that encompasses everything from quality control, facility design, maintenance schedules, documentation and record keeping, process validation. And listen, I'll tell you firsthand, don't get me wrong, getting a facility and a staff CGMP ready is definitely time consuming and can be challenging. But if you meet or I like to say exceed, because we try to exceed those standards, it'll allow you to develop robust SOPs that create accountability and process ownership. Because regulations are changing, and sometimes fairly frequently at the beginning, SOP reevaluation is a place where I wish I had actually focused a little bit more heavily prior to beginning the operation. When I think of SOPs and making our products, there's a tendency to find what works and have like a set it and forget it mentality. When those production processes or compliance tasks involve complex decision-making, in some instances, it requires situational judgment. It doesn't always apply to a rigid SOP framework. Costs change, demands change, suppliers change, staff changes. A lot of us are also startups. So as many of you know, and those of you who are here who are just dipping your toes into the water will come to find out, we have to be scrappy. We have limited resources at our disposal. So the combination of these things can create a challenge to maintaining the best practices. CGMP standards actually force you to, what I like to say, fireproof versus firefight. So at MFNY, we are a true what's called just-in-time manufacturer. So for those of you unfamiliar, just-in-time manufacturing, it's a production strategy that focuses on reducing sitting inventory and increasing efficiency. So the concept of the strategy, it's to produce and deliver products only when they're needed in the production process rather than stockpiling. Dealing with products like cannabis that have a finite shelf life, as you all know, isn't in anyone's best interest. No one wants cannabis products just sitting on a shelf. So by being a just-in-time manufacturer, it allows us to minimize waste, reduce storage costs, allow us as a processor to respond quickly to changes in demand and regulatory changes. Conversely, that process methodology, it can also create a higher risk of work stoppages due to quality issues. So any defect, contamination event, quality issue with any raw material, and I'm speaking about everything, not just from cannabis, but to hardware, to packaging, to raw inputs, it can cause a massive disruption of the business. So here, to combat it, we're working really hard to focus on cross-training and cross-functionality across all positions. So while we have a framework and general ideas of positions we hire for, we actually really try to fit roles to people, not people to the job. Playing to an employee's strength, providing them with a cross-functional role, can actually reduce dependence on specific individuals. It makes the company less vulnerable to disruptions. At the end of the day, listen, we're all human, right? We have lives outside of work. We get sick. We go on vacation. We have personal things come up. We need to tend to them. So having that cross-functionality is amazing. One of the things I've come to notice about the cannabis industry in New York so far, for the most part, These are the hardest working and driven individuals I've ever met. But, with that said, the grind comes at a cost. So the cross-functional roles and training with a compliance mindset allows us as an entire team to adapt to the fluctuations in demand and make sure critical tasks are completed and don't slip through the cracks, resulting in a compliance infraction.
Wait, Matthew,
like
can I stop you for one quick sec? Will you
Sure.
flesh out two terms that you've just made reference to that I know, and I love them because they're so industry.
Sure.
I want to make sure our listeners, especially the newer folks, are getting them. SOPs and CG.
Yep. So SOP is standard operating procedure, and CGMP is current good manufacturing practices. And a lot of people forget the C, but C is really important because it's current. It's constantly evolving, constantly changing. So those are two things. And again, I'm more than happy after this call, you can take my number, take my email, more than happy to discuss some of the terminology and how you can implement it as well.
Thank you, sir.
Of course.
Onward.
So, I mean, like I was saying, the cannabis industry in general in the US has a notoriously high turnover rate. This can be devastating to a company, both operationally and financially. So the nuance of regulation and compliance requirements are not something people just know. It takes time to train new hires and instill that compliance-driven mindset. So to me, a cross-functional workforce also allows you to train your people properly, not cut corners, but it also allows you to not disrupt your business and the need to make more products. So, I mean, just to wrap it up, building a compliance-driven culture, it's not just about adhering to regulations, it's about creating an adaptable company. By setting a tone of compliance from the top, especially clear SOPs, regularly auditing your processes, businesses like yours and like MFNY, we can operate more efficiently and responsibly. So as a community, a cannabis community, we are continuing to navigate the dynamic cannabis landscape. And this approach helps us, and hopefully it'll help you a little bit, stay flexible. It'll find ways for you to continuously improve and ensure that you all will provide the state with safe, high quality cannabis at all times.
Matthew, thank you. Thank you. Just
you.
like Alana, I almost lost my hand trying to keep up with these big underlines and stars. I want a quick two things I might want to go back over. What I love most about what you just had to say is I could actually visualize truly like a line of production. As you're saying, for example, the creation, what did you call it now when you create product on demand when it's being ordered?
Just-in-time manufacturing, yeah.
Just-in-time manufacturing, right. Makes plenty of sense, but I can also imagine, as you pointed out, the other side of when things go wrong. Oh my goodness gracious, now you've got a deadline that's a day away and how are we going to get there? So yeah, I mean, I encourage Samira, if you don't mind, can you put in MFNY's website, and I'll do the same during chat or as people are talking, if it doesn't get there. Matthew, what is the best way to reach you? If people
yeah, I mean, you can email me. It's Matt, M-A-T-T, at mfny.co.
Okay, wait, I'm putting it in the chat right now. M-A-T-T at mfny.co. Yeah, I thought so. Yep, perfect. Okay, everybody. So there we go. There we have the website for MFNY. Matthew, am I right? First of all, I love the way you said, by the way, setting a compliance culture, because I think it's really easy to get in the weeds. I know when I was working, for the medical supplier, it's really easy to get in the weeds, and it's really easy to obsess over, a particular detail. The regulations, it's no secret, are very complex. They're very broad. They're very comprehensive and expansive, and nobody could, I don't think can memorize them all. I mean, if you can, you're amazing. But for the most part, folks have to go back and reevaluate. As you pointed out, they're changing all the time. It's a changing landscape as the industry expands and grows, and as the needs change. I know we saw this in medical all the time, whether it was the introduction of a new kind of product. For a long time, flower wasn't allowed. And when flower was allowed and when flower was introduced, wow, there was a big thick book of the things you could and couldn't do. I love the way you talk about rolling it into a sort of ongoing daily conversation, because it seems to absorb into your almost like your DNA, right? When
Well,
you're doing
I mean, it has to, especially when you're trying to grow and scale and you have multiple different people working and staff turnover in cannabis is high. So it has to be top down and it has to be something that's implemented. I mean, again, the good part is we really do have segmented departments here. So there's cross functionality within those departments, but we still keep it fairly segmented. So it's not like an individual process worker is going to have to worry about robust compliance issues, right? We can drill it down into, again, more process ownership over that. So they're not responsible for making the bags. You know, the person that's doing our labels, we have a 3-party verification to make sure that the label matches the COA down to the 100th of a decimal point. We have a triple verification
COA,
check.
that's the certificate.
That's the certificate of analysis that's issued, and that must be for final, final packaged goods. You must have COAs. But again, it's important for us to make sure that there's that verification step, so that way there are no mistakes. To make sure that, I mean, listen, when you're looking at a bunch of numbers all day, it can get complicated. So we try to find ways to make it a little less stressful for employees to
a little more intuitive, maybe a little bit more natural processing. So on that, you mentioned internal auditing. Can you give us some examples of how you do that? How, one or two practices that you
Sure, yeah. So we have an auditing framework, and it goes from everything from, again, there's two paths. There's one which is the regulatory compliance audit, and there's the other which is process improvement audit. They are separate. Process improvement really functions on efficiency in process, waste, time to complete things. Regulatory compliance audit really focuses on, are you doing things the right way? Are they being done? Are we following our HACCP plan, which is the hazard analysis critical control points? Are you following the process flow of a product? Are you following the process flow of how you walk through a facility? Are you wearing appropriate PPE? Are you following all of the guidelines that are in our very comprehensive employee handbook? Like, those are all things that we're constantly evaluating, talking about. But auditing, like Alana said, OCM is there to help. Auditing internally is not for us to have a aha gotcha moment either. It's about engaging our workers to understand. It's not just saying, hey, you're doing this. It's explaining the methodology behind it, because there's reasoning behind the regulations. There's reasoning behind why things are done. So if you explain the reasoning and they can understand why it's done, a lot of times it'll click a lot better than just saying, oh, do it because I said so.
Yeah, right. Here's the discipline. You bring up a great point. I mean, I think you're encouraging your workers by teaching and educating your workers. You're encouraging your workers to have an investment in the outcome of their product. And to your point, it makes sense. This stuff makes sense. It's not just randomly applied, right?
I mean, and yes, I'm biased because I think our products are great, but I think it's fairly reflective in the market of how our products sell. And if you have process ownership into making those products, the product quality reflects that process ownership and pride in the process.
And I have to echo what you're saying. I'm proud to say that the organization I worked for was the same, very dedicated to making sure that we were doing things right. And we were in introducing two products, the honey lozenge and then the powdered concentrate, powdered distillate, into powder. And I just recall those days of very careful, very mindful to do things the right way, because it impacted the efficacy of the medicine. And that's a very important underlying message. I think, Alana, I'm sure you're going to be nodding your head on this. That's where the regulations ultimately come from, correct? I mean, that's the idea, is to create highest level product for consumer safety and enjoyment. It's also about enjoyment. Okay, so how often do you run an internal audit in your company?
Well, it depends on the process. I mean, approved supply, like, for instance, let's say we're doing an audit on our approved vendors list or suppliers list, because we have to make sure if we're getting, let's say, vape carts from an approved supplier, we typically do that on a quarterly basis. We have it tested. We make sure that there's no residual metals. We make sure that it's maintaining the product failure rates that we set internally. If it's talking about process improvement, we typically do that once every 2 months. From regulatory compliance audit, it really depends. Oftentimes it's usually 6 to 8 weeks after we introduce a SKU.
Okay, like a new product. For our
Correct.
listeners confused about a SKU, and that's an SKU. That's a new product. It's got a special number and it identifies this particular product line, not individual,
Correct.
right?
And part of the regulations, which I happen to really like, is like we do our own in-house shelf stability testing. So we have an HPLC machine, which is a lab equipment that can test potency. It can test conversion. It can test efficacy. We do water activity tests here to make sure that our products are stable. So those are things that are done like clockwork, and I'm the one that's constantly monitoring my staff to make sure, like I'll check the logs and say, hey, did you do this? Why isn't it done? Let's,
I get it. So by the way, there's logs that people have to fill out when they're doing things that are, oh, hi, Louis. I think you might need to mute, sweetie.
Yes.
Meanwhile,
Yeah. So, but again, that's part of the CGMP
there are logs that
requirement.
people have to fill in, right? That when they've done a job, you have
Yes.
to initial or check it or whatever.
Yes. So that's a
Yeah.
CGMP requirement, which is a requirement to maintain the license through OCM. And it can be intensive, but we have cleaning logs. We have daily maintenance logs, weekly maintenance logs. All of our track and trace, we actually do use a third-party track and trace system that's going to integrate with BioTrack. We also manually keep it on Google Sheets because, like Alana said, the more you have, the better. So we're constantly
grateful in those days when you don't have to let go, when you can let go of those Google Sheets. Oh,
no, but that's the thing. Internally, we've decided we're going to maintain those as well because you're only as good as the data that you enter, right? And there's humans entering data. So we want to be able to go back and verify and audit our own data to make sure, hey, did this person do this right? Is this matching? It's very important to us that we're putting forward good, compliant information.
Right. Right. Well, of course. And as you say, I mean, that's your reputation. Alana referred to that earlier. That's your reputation. Or was it you, Cecilia? One of you had referred to reputation. I forget that sometimes too, right? As an operator. I mean, one mistaken, there was a lawsuit about that where a processor felt she wasn't being fairly, she felt that her business had been seriously impacted by a problem she was having with compliance. And she felt that it really negatively impacted her operations. So, it's a real moment there. People, your name is out there, for the world to see. Oh my gosh, so amazing. Thank you, Matthew. Oh my gosh, I'm twice as inspired and staggered by the work that you all do as operators, and in your case, processor, distributor, and is it not cultivator? It is cultivator, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I do have to say we are product of the program. The program does work, and it's just going to take time with us with OCM to make sure that we're constantly engaging. And like Alana said, if you don't have the resource, you find it. If you need clarification, you ask.
Right.
My interactions with OCM have been nothing but positive. I mean, if I need clarification, I reach out. I'm not afraid to talk to the regulator, and they're not afraid to talk to me. And that's something that really, I think, to move this industry forward, we have to work together on.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because one of our audience members was putting in the chat that the email to OCM, and maybe Alana, you can speak to this a bit, to the compliance. Again, it was called compliance program, right? Compliance program group.
So I just responded to it. So yeah, that is the actual compliance email. Yes, you will get an automated response. That's how all, I feel like, state government emails, like even when you apply for a job with the state, you get an automatic reply saying, hey, we've received your email. And then as an actual human being goes and looks through the inbox, then they respond based on that. So somebody will get back to you. Obviously, also make sure you're emailing compliance about compliance issues, not about other things, because that's also why they're not going to respond to you. Because
will they send your email on to the right person in that case, or is that a lot?
That's hard to say, because remember, we're staffing up, we're getting there.
Yes.
We're getting to our, single point of contact, which will be helpful also. But it's like going through that process while still trying to do the work of the agency. It's going to take us some time, but you know, give compliance at ocm.ny.gov a little grace, and, you know, they will get back to you. And if anything, just follow back up. And also I would recommend, you know, you can put urgent or something in your subject line, you know, but they're not just going to straight ignore you. It just, you know, again, just takes a minute, because as you can imagine how many emails we get. And we also get a lot of people who email compliance about, you know, something. It could be about their landlord, or, you know, but not really a compliance issue. You know, they just email all the emails they can find.
Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, I admit it. In certain cases with Optimum, I've done the same. Okay, folks. Right now, I'm not seeing, I mean, I'm going to open the floor, obviously, as we promised. I'm not seeing any in the chat, anything that we haven't addressed. And I'm getting my little react. Oh no, not my react. Where are the little hands? Under participants or under react? I think it's under react, right? On the Zoom, or maybe it's on the share. But I'm not seeing any hands up at the moment. If anybody has a question, you want to just unmute and perhaps pop in with your question.
Hey, good afternoon. Sorry. Good afternoon. This is Luis Ortiz. I'm a licensed distributor. I just got my license in June. Going through Built Out now, and now we're trying to get compliance and find ways to figure out which way is the distribution going, because there's not a lot in the regulations about distribution. There are certain things, but it's not really down to the point. And when I do ask OCM, and my partner's on this panel, she's in the meeting also, Donna, and we've emailed them with questions and emailed them with questions and emailed them with questions. It's just like generic answers. Look at the pamphlet. Look at the pamphlet. I've read the pamphlet up and down, all around, and it really doesn't have a lot towards distribution. Now, I know Matthew knows a lot about distribution, so I'm glad that you're on this panel, and maybe you can help me out. Maybe I can contact you directly and ask you some questions. But, you know, I want to know because they're really not telling us too much. They're just letting us know you can get a van, make sure it's secure, and the hesitation, get a POS, get a third-party security monitoring, and be on your way. So that's what I've heard.
Thank you for that feedback, Louis. Any thoughts on that, Alana?
So I actually just reached out to Louis now. I told him to reach out to me. It's, you know, some of these things, since it's, I mean, and Cecilia probably understands this. It's like everything's so specific. I need to, you know, I don't want to someone's personal things. Just, yeah.
And we don't mean to put you on the spot. But
no, of course.
Yeah.
Louis, I just sent you a message. Just hit me back.
Terrific. Great stuff. See, look at this.
And Louis, at any time, I mean, you can hit me up anytime. Again, part of this is figuring it out together. And again, it's the regs are specific and vague at the same time. And that's intentional. I mean, because there needs to be leeway for you to be able to build your business based on best practice. So, you know, more than happy to chat and see what you need help with.
Terrific. And now we do have a raised hand from Rodney. Rodney, do you want to unmute?
Certainly. Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's great being here. My question is specific for Matt. I believe you mentioned accountability ownership. Just wanted to know what tools are you using in regards to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So accountability and ownership, it really depends on what level of the organization you're talking about, right? Or what process. So as far as accountability and ownership from a compliance standpoint, to me, that as COO, that falls on me. I own the compliance piece of that, and it's my responsibility. So my employees take how I act, how I run the business, the conversations we have, and that's how they choose to operate. I mean, if I don't show up to work every day, they're going to start not showing up to work every day. So I own that piece. As far as process ownership, for instance, we have somebody that runs our labeling machine. So their job is to make sure that that label is affixed properly, that it has all of the information, that it's not missing anything, that no bag goes without a label, that the security seal is on there. And that's part of their process, and they own that process. So they're proud. Like part of creating that accountability is not just teaching the process, explaining why the process is important. And then also when it comes to process work like that, setting targets, setting goals, setting incentives based on hitting those targets and goals. So, you know, that person, our gummy kitchen, they're constantly trying to improve the amount of gummies they produce at a time, right? So I have my kitchen manager coming today. They just broke a record, and it's a big celebration, and it's a big deal. And there's process ownership and pride in how they produce the product. So it's a mix of, it can be setting targets, it can be training, it could be positive reinforcement with incentives, and not just monetary either. You know, a great job goes a long way.
And a good vacation day thrown in. Throw in an extra
There you
vacation.
go.
And and also, I just wanted to add too, it's also about making sure your employees, I'm sure Matt, you'll agree with this, making sure your employees understand the SOP, because that is a lot of problem I find, is that, you know your stakeholder in the document. And, a good place to start, I always say, is like, if you have like a 12-year-old kid, imagine you want to get this 12-year-old kid to do this process. If that 12-year-old could do the process, then you need to go back to the drawing board and make your SOP, your process, easier to understand, to be able to do all those things that Matt had brought up.
I think that is such an excellent point. You cannot be too clear with people.
Yeah, I mean, and what we do for SOP development, it's kind of cliche, right? It's the open door policy, but I firmly believe in that. Just because we put something out doesn't mean it's the right way. I mean, it doesn't mean that an employee isn't going to have a great idea. Come and talk to us. If you want to improve a process, come and tell us. Let's talk about it. If you have, again, and that's, Rodney, that brings it back to process ownership. If you own that process and you come with ideas on how to improve your process in your area, it wouldn't help the process ownership if I say, no, we're not doing it that way. We're always open to suggestions. We don't have all the answers. So if they can come and be part, and it's a collaboration on how to develop that SOP and develop that process, then they're a lot more likely to follow it.
Seriously. Think about the time. Oh, sorry.
I was going to just say stakeholder involvement. That's like the key. And that's the buy-in.
I also
when do you decide when that process is revisited or, looked at for improvement? But I believe in the notion, if it's not broke, don't fix it,
So, and like I said, that was something that, a lot of people can fall into the set it and forget it mentality.
Just have to sit there and watch the practice.
But with that said, a lot of it also has to do with, you're going to, like, when you run your business, you're going to understand, like, your sales are always going to fluctuate. Your margins, like, your vape supplier their ship may have gotten caught in the sea somewhere, and now there's a shortage, so your cost of hardware goes up. So to me, continuous improvement, you're always trying to find better efficiencies to balance out the fluctuations in revenue and margins and all of that good stuff. So I think the more you evaluate, the better. I mean, you obviously have to give it a chance to work, but you should be evaluating fairly frequently.
Just quoting from an employee's perspective, Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to ask Rodney, what is your perspective, if you wouldn't mind sharing it?
No, I'm not currently employed in the industry. I'm hoping to be, so essentially, yeah.
Right, so you're looking at it from a person who's going to go into the industry to work.
Yes.
And you're kind of thinking about it like, how can I be the most impactful, the most contributing? That's great. That's pretty great. Matt, I think you should ask him for his resume. Oops.
Always open.
Stop my own business now, right? Anybody else? Oh, we see a new message. Hold on. Let's see what the message says. Oh, Cecilia, there she has her email. Okay, good. And Alana has responded. Okay, good. Yes, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. We've got Greg. Greg has got a raised hand. Go ahead, sir. Greg with the exclamation point. There we go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. My question has to do with human resources. My father, he has 2 dispensaries in New Mexico, and yesterday he got approved for his license for one in New York in Bayside, Queens. And he wants me to learn more about human resources, hence why I'm here this evening. So my question is that something that, like basically what would be the first step for me to go into that direction? Is there, I know someone mentioned like an employee handbook. How does one go about making that? Is there an example that's out there that you know, we could look at and implement it for the dispensary? And just basically, where would I have to go to right now to that next step in learning about human resources for the business?
So I'll start with the employee handbook. We have a sample employee handbook on our website. I think I put the link in here yet. Cannabisworkforce.org. And definitely educating yourself. We're actually rolling out a whole new series that are more focused on employer based. So things like hiring, HR practices, and that sort of thing. We'll be able to provide a good high level overview. Another good resource to check out is Shroom. Or I always mispronounce it. I don't know if it's Shroom. It's SHRM. It's the human for SR. What is my brain is like fried. I cannot get this acronym right. Give me
It's a long
second.
day too, hon.
Yeah. Yes, it's SHRM. And they provide a lot of resources, whether it's different like templates. I think you might have to pay for a membership, but you know, if this is going to be your world, I do think it might be worth considering investing in one. I
did put in the chat, Cecilia, Cannabis Workforce Tools --resources.
Oh, perfect.
That's it for the employee handbook, everybody. That's your link to CWI's free employee handbook.
Thank you. And then the SHRM website too. They have model templates for things. They have articles, blogs, classes. So I think that's a good kind of starting point.
I'll be putting that in shortly, everyone. Yeah. Found it. Okay, good.
And congrats to your father. That's exciting.
Yeah, he was very excited yesterday.
So he found out yesterday and then it was announced today.
Yeah, he found out yesterday and he was like, so what are you doing with your life? You want to come work with me?
I'm like, my dad is opening a dispensary. Why? I think I just might.
Yeah.
That's pretty great. Congratulations. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
You know, I can also add there's other, you know, those are great resources Cecilia mentioned. If you have the ability, there are some really great employment attorneys out there as well. New York State labor laws are very, very nuanced and specific and very complex. So we are fortunate enough to have an employment attorney, but there's also other legal options available that are not as expensive. There's one, it's called Legal Shield, where you can get, it's a little bit of a cheaper option where you can, if you have specific questions, you can get answers from attorneys without having to pay, you know, massive retainer or things like that. Like there are a lot of options. Because remember, you have to make sure you get your sexual harassment training annually. And there's a lot, the employee handbook is really meant to protect your business.
I'm putting the link in now for the Legal Shield. And then folks, I want to add as a reminder, Legal Aid Society, especially for cannabis businesses here in New York, the Small Business Solutions, you know, SBS is part of New York City. Each borough has a business, I think it's called Business Solutions. Yes, Business Solutions Office. And each office has a cannabis account manager. You may not realize that, but there is somebody there who wants to work with you. Now, I not to be shameless here, but let's start with us here at Lehman. We'd love to help you. So just come on by, give me a call, send me an email. We'll sign you up for the incubator and we'll start advising you right away. And we'll get you the resources, because it's true, when these moments happen, we learn too, and then we get to create our referral systems and references. But we already start with accounting and legal, et cetera. We do have a bunch of resources already. It's just, you know, always an ongoing expansive thing, right? Oh, wait, we've got a question from Hector. Is there a list of required and necessary SOPs for OCM compliance for retailers? Necessary SOPs. Anybody?
So there's not, I wouldn't say that there's a list. This is why it's important, to go through and read the regulations. But I think it's all, of course, obviously necessary SOPs are important, but what are necessary SOPs, are going to depend a lot on your license type, a variety of different things. And you're also going to need other SOPs that are not just necessary, related to all the other things we've talked about today, whether it's your stuff related to employees or other processes like Matt had brought up. Definitely look to the regs. And I would also say too, though, there were a lot of different groups for free that had gone through the regulations when they came out. And it's presented to you in like layman's terms, easier to understand. And I know there's a lot of recordings of that as well. And I highly recommend people, use the internet as a resource and check some of those out, because I think you'll find it helpful in getting a basic grasp of things that may seem complicated. Or when you look to the requirements of, say, a retailer in this instance, in the regulations, and you don't understand anything, use these resources, whether you're hitting up Matt or you're hitting up the OCM, we can help you understand it in plain language, the best way to go about those things. But remember, exactly like Matt said, and I love this that you said, Matt, was talking about, it's purposely vague for a reason, because it's like, there's this rule, but how you go about it, we give you that room to figure out what's going to work best for not only your operation, but the size of your operation, of course, your license type, etc. And, it's just about playing in that area of vagueness and making sure you're in alignment with, the overarching concepts that are given to you in the regs.
Alana, we have a question. Is the guidance, in quotes, an abbreviated version of the regs?
So there is guidance, and that is not necessarily, I guess you could kind of sort of call it an abbreviated version. It's a more easy to understand and an elaboration. Some things, maybe it wasn't that clear to people in a reg, and so we've gotten a lot of questions about it. So then they will prepare guidance, trying to explain these process, or the issues that they're seeing, so better people can better follow the rules. So the guidance is going to be, I'm trying to think of a good way to say this. It's going to be again, I guess it's the best way to say is it's the layman's terms. It's the easier to understand version. It doesn't give you everything. Yeah. It's give you a nice taste and understanding, which I think gives a good foundation for when you take that dive in the regs. I know
it's a good place to start. I think you're right.
Correct.
I mean, you're bringing me back, Alana, and I'm remembering now. I mean, granted, I've just been through this, as we all have in this current AU regulations, but when the medical regulations were drafted, I had no experience whatsoever reading regulatory documents, and I was utterly overwhelmed, to your point. And literally, all I needed to do was go over it once or twice further, and then I said, "Oh, wait, it's actually not that complicated once you get used to the way it's written." If you've ever started a dense book, it takes you 50 pages to read the way the author is writing. It's a little bit the same idea, if I remember it correctly, right? A quick question. When the regs are updated, how will license holders know that?
Well, this is why I always say, make sure you're keeping up on the OCM website. Definitely watch board meetings. Like, if you can't attend, watch them. They're virtual. You can even watch them after, or just check out the slides or the minutes or transcript or whatever to keep, keep abreast of the things that are going on. They do announce them there. They present, for the board to approve potential regulations, like they did with the packaging, label, and marketing stuff. They'll also tell you about, when you can do public comments and when you can, when they expect this to be implemented. And so I think those are really super crucial. You know, follow the social media of the OCM. I find that they're pretty good about updating on like different things, even reports we put out and things of that nature. Yeah, I think those probably are the best ways. And of course, like I said, check the OCM website, and we have a page
Just
specific.
stay on it, right on the compliance section, because it sounds like to a certain degree, and it's understandable, Alana, but we do want to be clear. The onus is on you to stay on top of those regs, to stay on top of when they're updating. It's no one's going to come, to be frank, and hold your hand through this one. You got to, this is going to be an area, in other words, of your operations that you're going to have to stay on it. And therefore, to the points earlier made, perhaps having a regulations person early on, compliance person early on, is a really good investment, right? Maybe before you're having an assistant manager to the dispensary operations, you better have maybe a manager and a regulation person, right? Perhaps. Hector has a great question. Does the OCM welcome package contain all the requirements to pass final? No.
No.
To my prior point, right?
Like, no, definitely not. That is just, you know, letting you kind of know what sort of to expect to come up. But remember, you always have to follow all the regulations. So when they do your inspection, they're going to be checking for all of those requirements that you followed, even the things we touched on related to security, you know, and again, like if depending on your license, you know, maybe packaging, it might be, you know, again, these are going to depend on your license type, but you need to abide by the regs. That is going to be all the requirements to pass your final inspection. But if
Right.
you've gotten this far, that means you're probably likely following these things. So just make sure you're staying on top of it. And, you know, again, if you feel like you have any issues, Hector, you know, don't be afraid to contact the person who's telling you have a problem, and they will absolutely work with you in, you know, again, correcting the issue.
Right. Well, you know, Alana, honestly, that's a very valuable statement. And with gratitude to the state, the Office of Cannabis Management really specifically, because that's got to be soothing to folks who've just, you know, and they're investing a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, energy, and you know, prayers and hopes into something here. And to know, you know, hey, we are reachable. We are, you know, your partners in staying safe. But yeah, to reiterate, it really, really does sound like it's a very, very important piece for people to be staying aware of and on top of. You know, nothing wrong with that message. That's okay, I think. All right, folks. Well, we're getting down to 7:30, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time, which we value. Does anybody have any final thoughts they might want to kick in, unmute, and just sort of share with the group? I'm scrolling through. I think everybody seems like they're pretty content. Hi, Gregory. Good to see you. All right, folks. Well, listen, I want to thank. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, hi, my name is Kimberly Howard. I follow the industry, looking to one day jump into cannabis compliance and regulations. I come from sort of a public health background, working mainly in COVID lately, and doing a lot of the compliance and regulations things there, and building out pods and different things. And so it excites me to be in this industry. So I bring that, but I want to say this was very informative and very helpful that these panels are put together. And so thank you.
Kimberly, that's so great to hear. Music to all of our ears. I know I speak for the panelists.
Shout outs to Alana too as well. It's great to see her around and doing her thing as well, and giving great insight as well. So thank you. And everyone else on the panel.
Well, I think Kimberly put it perfectly. I mean, how can we thank Alana, Cecilia, and Matthew? I mean, really, you have provided us with gold, with liquid gold, right? I mean, for operations, the safety, right? Gregory's got the claps going. We're all going to do our claps. I mean, it really robust. I was hoping it would be interesting and robust. It most definitely met all of my hopes and expectations. You guys are great. Real pros at the helm here. So I hope you won't mind if I pick on you again for future. Participants, thank you too for taking time out of your days and your nights. We hope moving forward that these are, like tonight was, a conversational style. So you can be cooking your dinner, caring for your kids or pets or family members, or just kicking back with a nice relaxing substance of choice and listening to the great wisdom being shared, because it is important. But we also recognize folks are very busy during the day with jobs and assorted commitments. So we appreciate your time and your dedication to the industry. So everyone be well and watch your emails for the November 22 employment law panel discussion. Woo!